Imagine a world where books could be burned and banished, where the greatest works of art could be deemed worthless, and where the creators of these masterpieces could be forced to apologize for their own creations. This is not a dystopian future, but a reality that many artists and thinkers faced during the Middle Ages, a time when the power of the Church was so overwhelming that it could make even the most brilliant minds question their own worth. One such mind was Geoffrey Chaucer, the father of English literature, who, towards the end of his life, felt compelled to revoke his life's work and beg for forgiveness. This is a story of faith, fear, and the human struggle for redemption. In the late 14th century, Europe was a place of deep religious fervor. The Christian faith, while offering solace and a sense of purpose, also generated immense anxiety. The fear of eternal damnation was a constant presence, and even the most celebrated figures of the time were not immune to its weight. Chaucer, who had spent his life crafting the most beautiful and enduring works of literature in the English language, found himself in a state of profound doubt. In his envoy to the Parson's Tale, he wrote, "I revoke and renounce all the books and all the verse that I have written before, for the honor of our Lord and of his mother and of all the saints, and for the profit of my own soul, in order that I may be one of those at the day of doom that shall be saved." This act of renunciation is both tragic and revealing. Chaucer, who had explored the human condition with such depth and humor in works like the Canterbury Tales and Troilus and Chryside, was now questioning the very value of his art. The Church's influence was so strong that it could make a man doubt the worth of his entire life's work. This is a stark reminder of the power of religious doctrine and the psychological toll it could take on even the most gifted individuals. But Chaucer was not alone in his struggle. The story of Pope Celestine V, the 13th century founder of the Celestine Order, offers another perspective on the intense spiritual conflicts of the time. As a young man, Celestine had chosen a life of extreme asceticism, spending 16 hours a day in prayer, wearing a hair shirt, and fasting on water and cabbage leaves. His devotion to God was so profound that he attracted disciples and even the attention of the church hierarchy. In a turn of events that must have been both shocking and humbling, he was elected pope. However, the weight of this responsibility was too much for him, and he resigned, returning to his hermit's life of self-affliction and the search for God. Celestine's story is a powerful example of the tension between spiritual purity and worldly power. He had achieved the highest position in the church, but it was not a source of comfort or fulfillment. Instead, he found that the only way to truly serve God was to renounce the very power that had been thrust upon him. This act of self-denial was so unusual that it remains unique in the history of the papacy. It speaks to the deep-seated belief that true piety required a complete renunciation of self and the world. The influence of the Celestine Order, named after Celestine V, continued to grow in the centuries that followed. The order was favored by popes and kings, and its members were granted the authority to offer indulgences to those who sought penance. One such patron was Enguerrand de Coucy, a nobleman who, in 1390, decided to establish a monastery for 12 monks of the Celestine Order on his land. Coucy's decision was not driven by personal anxiety, but by a desire to ensure his own salvation and the salvation of his family. He endowed the monastery with a significant annual income, and took great care to ensure that the monks would have the resources they needed to carry out their religious duties. This act of patronage was not uncommon among the nobility, who saw the support of religious institutions as a way to secure their place in the afterlife. The establishment of the monastery was a complex and ongoing process. Coucy made additional donations to ensure that the buildings were completed and that the monks had access to the necessities of life, including wine and a place of shelter during times of war. His attention to detail and his commitment to the well-being of the monks is a testament to the importance he placed on their role in his spiritual life. In the same year, 1390, a significant military expedition was planned against Barbary, a region in North Africa known for its pirate activities. The expedition was led by some of the most prominent figures of the French nobility, including Bourbon, Coucy, and the Duke of Lancaster's bastard son, John Beaufort, Earl of Somerset. The King of France, eager to support the crusade, provided financial backing, and the Pope offered a plenary indulgence to those who participated. The goal was to strike a blow against the infidels, and to demonstrate the military might of Christendom. The expedition was a grand affair, with a fleet of 40 galleys and 20 cargo ships carrying around 5,000 men, including 1,400 to 1,500 knights and squires. The journey was not without its challenges. A storm off the island of Elba dispersed the fleet, and it took 9 days to regroup at Malta. When they finally arrived at Mahdia, a walled town on the coast of North Africa, they faced a well-fortified enemy. The siege of Mahdia was a grueling and challenging operation. The Berber Sultan, Abu el-Abbas, had decided to avoid a direct confrontation and instead adopted a strategy of attrition. He allowed the Christians to land without resistance, but then used the city's fortifications and the harsh summer heat to wear down the besiegers. The Crusaders, despite their initial confidence, soon found themselves facing a series of setbacks. The heat, thirst, and illness took a toll on their ranks, and the Berber forces, using hit-and-run tactics, kept them constantly on edge. Coucy, one of the leaders of the expedition, showed great concern for the welfare of his men. Unlike the Duke of Bourbon, who was often indifferent to the needs of the lesser knights, Coucy took a hands-on approach, ensuring that the poorer knights and squires were well cared for. His kindness and leadership earned him the respect and loyalty of his followers. When the Berbers proposed a parley, Coucy and Bourbon listened to the envoy's arguments, which questioned the justification for the war. The Crusaders' response, emphasizing the religious differences and the supposed sins of the Saracens, did little to change the Berbers' stance. The siege of Mahdia dragged on for several weeks, with the Crusaders facing daily skirmishes and constant harassment. Despite their efforts, they were unable to breach the city's defenses. The conditions in the camp were harsh, and morale was low. The lack of proper provisions, the heat, and the constant threat of attack took a heavy toll on the besiegers. One of the most notable events during the siege was the proposed combat between 10 Christian and 10 Berber champions. The idea was met with enthusiasm by many of the knights, but Coucy, recognizing the potential risks, strongly advised against it. He argued that the fight could not achieve the goal of taking the city, and that it could be a trap. Despite his warnings, the combat went ahead, but the Berbers did not show up, leaving the Christian camp in a state of anticipation and disappointment. The siege of Mahdia ultimately ended in failure. The Crusaders, unable to break the city's defenses and suffering from the harsh conditions, were forced to withdraw. The expedition, which had begun with such high hopes, ended in a bitter defeat. The failure of the siege was a reminder of the challenges of waging war in a foreign land, and the limitations of military power in the face of determined resistance. The story of the siege of Mahdia, like the stories of Chaucer and Celestine V, is a testament to the complex and often contradictory nature of human faith and action. It shows how even the most powerful and influential figures of the time were not immune to doubt and the search for meaning. The Middle Ages were a time of great religious fervor, but they were also a time of intense personal struggle and the constant questioning of one's place in the world. In the end, these stories remind us that the human experience is one of constant striving, of seeking meaning and purpose in a world that is often uncertain and challenging. Whether it is through the creation of art, the pursuit of spiritual purity, or the struggle for military victory, the human spirit is defined by its resilience and its ability to find hope and redemption in the face of adversity.